So, welcome everybody to this episode of the Sailing Science Center podcast. Today we have with us Jonas Schumacher, co-founder of the Smartmark racing mark company that makes robotic racing marks. So, Jonas, thank you for doing the podcast with us. You started the Smartmarks company. When was that founded?
I'm the co-founder of
Okay.
Smartmark. I founded it with a good friend of mine. Everything actually started more than 6 years ago while we were racing together on a very deep lake in the Alps. And we had beautiful conditions. The only annoying thing was that the wind was shifting like hell. I think we had more than 150 meters of water depth. So if you think about to drop an anchor for a sail mark, just to lay out the perfect course, and you have a wind shift of a few degrees and you have to change everything, it takes a long time to get these anchors up again and to replace the marks and make these adjustments. And for us, the day was like we started the first race and it was abandoned because we had a wind shift of 30, 40 degrees. So it's not possible to make any fair racing anymore. And until the race course was set again, it took like 45 minutes, nearly 1 hour. And it was the entire day like that. So when we started the next race, the wind decided to turn back again. So after a long day on the water, we did not finish one single race. And while we had a camera drone on top of us, we were just doing fun. We had a nice beer after sailing, of course, anyway, absolutely enjoyed to be there. But while having a beer and looking at this camera drone, we had this idea, why is not that possible to do on the water? We got drilling boats for deep water science and of course oil drilling ships that are huge and keep their position. So why isn't it possible to make a little boat what is just self-positioning and able to keep its position without the use of an anchor and to just control remote? And that's actually how this idea came up. And of course we thought it's super easy. It's one dimension less than a flying drone. But at the end it took 5 years until we were really happy and realized that there is much more than just building a boat and just put in a GPS antenna. That Smartmark is actually the idea to boost efficiency and quality and sustainability especially into sail racing. We got a lot of regattas going on every year. And to set race courses and to adjust them is always tough work. It's always the need of powerboat fuel consumption and a lot of people helping to do that job. And the idea for us was actually to do something probably like a drone just on the water. So a self-positioning mark where we are able to set the perfect race course. And the marks will be self-positioning and keep the position without using an anchor. And that's what Smartmark is.
And maybe for people who are less familiar with sailboat racing, if you could explain what it means to have a perfectly aligned race course that, why does that matter? Why do these small adjustments in the mark positions matter?
To a race course on the water, regularly, the most races you always start against the wind, so wind upward. And you want, of course, wind is never really from the same direction, so there are always smaller wind shifts and changes. Of course, you want that all boats attending in this race have the same chances, and this is necessary to do fair sports. And due to wind changes or even race courses that are not perfectly aligned, depending on the side where you are going to start, you will have huge differences. So you have to think about that you start on the water. It's not like on a racetrack where you just have a traffic light which sets on green. The boats had about 5 minutes to get the right position behind our starting line, which is most of the time between a fixed anchored race committee boat and a race mark. And in between this boat and this mark, there is a starting line, and the boats are not allowed to cross this starting line before the starting signal is given. So for the boats, there's a lot of tactics and to find the right position for them, not just where the best wind is, but also where they get probably less boats that are disturbing them. And of course, everyone wants to be the first to cross the starting line. And if the starting line is not perfectly aligned, there will be one side which is definitely much better than the other one. And this is quite important for the start, and the rest is also that you start against the wind. So we call it racing upwind. And it doesn't really make sense to make a race course which is not upwind, but maybe you have the wind from the side or whatever, so that you don't have really tactical movements, because then the boats just go the same direction and there is nothing they really fight for to get the best position and to keep their best position.
No. But it's a brilliant idea, really. And the more that I've allowed that to settle in and understand what it is the benefits seem very, very noticeable for yacht racing. What would be interesting, Jonas, would be to get a little bit of background on you and kind of your growth path in this, both maybe your early years, how you got into sailing, what educational background you had that led you up to this point of co-founding a company that makes robotic racing marks.
I grew up in the very north of Germany, actually in the most northern town of Germany called Glücksburg. If we would translate it to English, it would be Lucky Castle. So it's a really, really nice place next to the Danish border. My family did not really had a sailing background until then, but my father, he was out with friends in between and really enjoyed sailing. He never became a sailor, but he really pushed us in young ages to. We have a nice sailing club next, just a few hundred meters next to us, and me and my brother, we started sailing, I think, with the age of 5 or 6 in the Optimist, and then like all the dinghy classes, and both of us, we got really addicted to sailing, and I decided quite early that I would love to be in the future somehow in this business. So I started working for a lot of sailing event companies. We did sailing road shows. I took care about the boat management for big car brands who were sponsoring those events. Later on, I founded my first company. Doing like promotional stuff. Always in touch a lot with the water sports and sailing. I took later after this, I took a little break, or not even a break, but I had the opportunity to become a bosun on a 100-foot sailing yacht, which was planned to sail around the world. Most of the time cruising. We did some nice maxi cup races, maxi regattas. Not too much, but it was, I think, one of the best times actually in my life, because it was just amazing to come around and just, it really pushed me again that I really want to be in that business. I love just to be in this international sailing areas, going out, meet new people, meet new cultures, and sailing is what it gives to me. And after my return back to Germany, I was a little bit I did not really know what I'm going to do now, because I on one way I really wish it was to be on this boat. It's a good life on one way, but on the other hand, it's really something. Find something what you really want, and something what you can do for your life. And I always had the wish to found my own company, and I started then to get back into the promotional business. I had some boats, so we did the German Sailing League, for example. We did the entire boat service for them and the entire logistic parts. We chartered the boats to them. And when I started working in this, I met Kai, my co-founding partner, and yeah, when we came up with this this idea, and I realized that he's the man who's able to develop such a product. We made the decision, okay, let's work on this. Yeah, and this is, yeah, as mentioned, it's 6 years ago now. The company was founded 2 years ago, so it took us a while until we really said, okay, now we are ready to enter the market with that.
So in that, and so 6 years, and then most or much of that was consumed in technical development or the engineering. Would that be accurate?
Yes, absolutely. So when
Okay.
we started with this idea, we did not even think in the first moment about really doing a business out of that. It was more, honestly, it was quite egoistic to develop Smartmark, because we were just annoyed to wait that long until a race course was set. And so we said, no, it's later on, when we really started to think about this idea, we realized all the advantages, and it's not just about the time for the sailors. It's way more what came up, and this is of course also a question then how you're going to found a company, because to develop such a product, there's a lot of effort, and of course it's also a lot of money you need to get this done, because I don't know how often we failed. We failed like 5 or 6 times with prototypes. I mean, every prototype helped us, but we failed. We failed that we were also close to quit, honestly.
Well, tell us. Those are always interesting. Is the failures and how we learn from those, because I think that's an essential part of development, is those failures, and it's nothing to feel bad about, but rather those are the steps we take. So what were some of the things that you ran into, the roadblocks that then you had to overcome, and maybe if there's any interesting stories around that, share some of those.
That there are a lot of stories about this. The first thing was to realize how this mark will keep its position in all weather conditions. The the one question we always receive is, how much wind is Smartmark able to last? That's easy. I mean, it's not the biggest problem to keep the mark in big wind speeds. The bigger problem is how you keep the mark in very light conditions, because there is always something the mark has to fight against. So if you think about, you have very less wind, or actually no wind, and there is no current, there is nothing where the mark is able to fight against. And it needs a little bit of pressure. It's self-propelled, so the propellers has to do some work. And the if you don't have this, you don't want that the mark is moving like 2, 3, 5 meters. I hope meters is fine for you. And sorry, so you, I just sometimes I don't know. So let me know if I have to talk in inch, then I get my calculator on. Um, so this was a big issue. Also, what is that you really get this mark to do mini adjustments, and not to it's not moving too much, because if you think about you are racing in very light condition, and then you have a tough moving mark, and this is the difference definitely to regular sail mark. They, of course, they are moving, and regular sail mark, depending, of course, on the water depth, are much more moving as longer their anchor line is. But they regularly they are not really moving in light conditions, and this was really difficult to get done. And then it's of course about the technique. Uh, at the beginning, we started just to use GPS antennas, but then we realized that in the GPS signal you got deviations, and if you just have a GPS antenna, uh, and this is the only signal the mark gets, if there is a deviation, the mark will follow that deviation. And until now, you have like 10 to 30 feet of movement in the GPS, and you don't want that your mark is moving like that. So this was difficult. What technique is able to do it, and it's not just to put just components inside the mark. At the end, there is a software behind all this who's calculating every second to keep the mark in the position. So of course the software is a big thing. We had difficulty with events where they use wireless microphones, for example, but and they were on the same or VHF channels who disturbed the signal to the marks, and marks started moving just as nobody did something, but the marks decided to just start driving. There was a lot of stuff. What happened, and yeah, so I don't know what and then of course it's like it's also a question about your team spirit. I mean, it's two people, both of us. We are quite tough with each other, so it's like sailing on a boat. So we can be quite noisy to each other if something doesn't work, and also to keep this together if stuff doesn't work. Was sometimes quite very difficult in between, where we really fight it against each other, but always were smart enough to go to each other and say, hey, it doesn't make sense if we cheat each other. We have to find solutions.
Yeah, this is like
And
it's like a married couple when you're a co-founder of an organization like this,
it
and
is, yeah.
you really have to manage that relationship, I think. And there's a lot of stories about, co-founders of these companies where yeah, the arguments do them in, right? And this,
It is definitely, yeah.
but
I think it's in most of the startups, of course, and of course if you start founding, or such an idea is growing, and then you think about, wow, we could probably found a company and really make a change and really bring a new product on the market and a game-changing product on the market. Later on, it's especially in this area, or it's about trust, especially in the sailing world, because it's a small world, and if you bring up a product what is not working very well, um, it doesn't take very long that people talk about it and say, yeah, probably it's a nice idea, but it's not really good, or it's not precise
the
enough.
word
So we will,
the word gets around, right?
yeah. But it's much faster, right? So something bad is much faster than something good.
Yeah, I was going to read off the spec sheet for a second. For the standard Smartmark, you've got a length of 3.6 feet for the hull. I'm using feet, not meters now. And including the tube, it's about 5 feet long, 2.3 feet wide of the hull. The height from the waterline is 8 feet. I guess that's maybe fairly standard for racing marks at that level. And then the weight, 185 pounds. What caught my eye though is the motors. You have two motors, each with, it says 30 pounds of thrust. Which I guess if I picture that, it's like a small trolling motor, like a Minn Kota that you might put on a little fishing boat or something. And I think that, it's interesting to me that you can actually maneuver something that big with so little thrust. How did you what was the trial and error like to settle on the kinds of motors and thrust that you needed for different wind conditions?
So first of all, you're absolutely right with your motors. It's exactly what you say. It's like this trolling motors. It's actually Minn Kota. I don't know if this is commercial, but yes. Um, we use that motors. It has and of course we have we have motor controllers that are able to I think we will run I think we have the motor power on 95%, dropped a little bit. And we have on our user interface, we are able to give the Mark different drive modes. So we have an eco mode, which is just for slowly driving. The Mark will not be, I mean, in light wind condition, the Mark will then be able also to keep its position. Regularly, you will have the Mark on the normal speed. It will drive, so if it's self-driving, it will be a bit faster, but especially the motors get the power they need to more or less stay in all positions. And if it's really tough conditions or you have a lot of current, for example, you also have to fight against, and not just current, but probably you have current and strong wind, then there is still a max boost button where we really get the full power of the motors. The entire system, or the shape of the Mark, it's based on a GRP catamaran hull. So it's like that. This two motors, they are fixed, so it's not turning around. So it's not motors that they do 360 movements. They are fixed, and the Smartmark pulls into the wind in light conditions. And if it's getting, or if there is needed more power, it will turn around and go bow first into the wind or into the current. And the idea is, it's actually the same what you do with a power boat. If you have for example, a rig with two engines, try to keep the boat bow first in the wind. It's super difficult. But if you go backwards and you play with both motors, forward, backward, and this is actually what the Smartmark does. And this is it's it's not just way easier for the Mark, especially in light conditions. The Mark is also much more stable if it goes stern to. If you have, and this is what I mentioned before, if you have more wind and there is more forces the Mark can fight against, then it's easy for the Mark. And this is actually the thing. If as more wind you have, as more stable the Mark will be.
This, Jonas, you're pointing out something because I'm also a 100-ton captain and I drive these big twin-engine dinner cruise boats, and it's something that I'm surprised by even fairly experienced boat handlers, that their intuition is to always keep the bow into the wind. And that the boat really is not stable in that direction, that the boat is stable when you have the stern into the wind. And if you want to just control your heading, you go, provided the waves aren't too big and coming over the stern, you keep the stern into the wind. And maybe for some of our listeners, that might also be a surprise, but that's the more stable configuration for most boats, because as you're saying, you're pulling that end of the boat into the wind, and that is a more stable configuration, requires less maneuvering. So this is very interesting, and you did answer one of the questions I had, which was whether your propellers, those pods, were azimuthing, which you said no, they're not. They're like the fixed motors on the two hulls of a catamaran, and that makes a lot of sense. But it sounds like there is what I'll say, a lot of intelligence that must be built into this to know, do I keep my stern into the wind, or do I go into drive mode where I go bow into the wind and waves, or wind and current? That there must be, I mean, because you're not manually controlling this with a joystick. This is all automated like a drone. Is that right?
That's right. Yeah. So we don't have a joystick at all. So if you go and want to sail the marks manually or set the marks manually, you can bring you give the mark a waypoint and you push a play button and the mark will go direct way to this waypoint. We thought about to do a joystick or like a touch joystick. Most of the time we use a tablet computer, or everything what we do on our entire user interface is web based. So we decided not to do an application, just because we were afraid that iOS or Android are doing some changes and the entire systems doesn't work in the future anymore. So this is why we decided let's do it web based. And the nice thing is that you can use any device. So you can whether do it by your smartphone or tablet, you can use your computer. Actually, I could, if you would have Smartmarks in San Francisco, I could set your race course from my office here. But we decided not to have this joystick, because what was very important for us while we developed was that we want to keep it as simple as possible, the entire user interface. And if you have then a joystick, then it already starts to get complicated, whether you drive the mark away from you or it comes up to you, what is left, what is right. And it's just like a lot of stuff. So we said we will just do it to bring because it's good, of course, and it's necessary that you can bring the mark to some point itself, but it's not really, it's not the major impact of Smartmark that you drive around with the mark. Yeah, and the intelligence is definitely there, that the mark realize what is best for the mark. Is it better to go stern to, or is it better to go bow first? But what we have on our user interface is also a button, because there might be a little gap in between the wind conditions where the mark thinks it's better to back up or to go bow first. And if you think about that, wind speeds are not the same all the time. So they might drop, and there might be some gushes in between. And in this gap, it's about between 8 to 30 knots. It's always a bit different depending on the situation, and maybe also on if you have current or no current. We have a button where we can tell the mark if you don't know what is right for you, because what happens if the mark makes its own decisions, in some situations it will just turn around all the time. So it goes bow first, then it turns back again, and then you have a dancing mark, and we don't want any dancing marks. So if the mark doesn't know what is right, we push a button and tell the mark bow first, and the mark will just turn around and just go bow first and stop trying even to go stern first. And this is what we, as from 8 knots on, we always have it bow first.
Okay, so there's
Or
so
8,
you
9
can,
knots.
but in a nutshell, you can override the decision making, the onboard decision making of the mark through this button. Now, one of the things in your specs that I noticed was that you kept a number of, I think you called them barometric sensors on the Smartmark, and maybe you could describe those. And what I was picturing was, okay, so you're measuring. Usually, I think a barometer that's measuring air pressure, but maybe this is for wind sensing, or maybe you could talk a little bit about that. What meteorological information the Smartmark is acquiring and how that's being used.
Okay. It has actually nothing to do to collect any data. When I said before, if you just use GPS, the mark will follow the deviations. So it's just impossible to be precise. The way we choose to avoid this is that we have a quadruple sensor technology, which is 4 times gyroscopes to measure the 3-dimensional movements of the mark. The mark has 4 compasses to measure its direction, and the mark has 4 barometers. And the barometers are needed because even the GPS signal is different on what weather conditions you have. The GPS signal, if you have clouds and rain, is different than if you have blue sky. The GPS signal is different if you are in the mountains or if you are on level 0. And this is what the barometers are for. And all this information are going into our software to measure what is the best way how to steer the motors. So it's a very, very complex software with, I don't know, I think it's more than 600 parameters what the mark uses or the software uses to keep the mark that precise in position. But we are definitely keen in the future, and we already think about this, that our technique and the base of the Smartmark could, of course, also be something for the science, what do we call it? Ocean science and to collect useful data. It's now you have to think about that the base of the Smartmark is the hull, and on top there is an inflatable sail marker, but we could remove it and we could put something else on it. So we could put a lot of sensors. We also put sensors into the hull, for example, to measure salt content or oxygen content, microplastic. It's something we have to talk about scientists what to do, but I think that our base could bring a lot of good stuff with it, and we're also working on the XL version, as you might have seen. So it will be the double size, so where you really have a lot of space in. I hope we have it ready. The first is planned to have on the water end of September now.
Okay. Well, one of the things I've spent a little bit of time on a PRO boat. So PRO, for people who aren't racers, is a principal race officer. And I've gone out with one of our top PROs on the bay on his boat. And a lot of the time that's spent on those boats is the officer holding up a wand with a piece of yarn on it and trying to figure out what the wind direction is, and trying to align the race course properly to that wind direction. So, and they'd like to know what these wind directions are at different points on the course. So it makes me think: is this something that could be or is incorporated into the Smartmark? Does the Smartmark know what the wind direction is at its location?
It's prepared that we are able to attach an anemometer, so a wind measurer on top of the mark, so that you can get your wind reading actually from each single Smartmark on your user interface on the race committee boat. The problem we have for now is that the mark, of course, is due to its height and due to the shape, is moving, especially in the top. And there is, for now, what we have tested, one wind measurer we can use, and it's super expensive. And we hope to that there will be some improvement, that we will attach something, because this wind measurer has actually the same price like one of the Smartmarks. So it's about $5,000 or $6,000, and you can already attach it now if you want. but the request actually is not that high for the moment for us. But it's definitely possible. Yeah, it's about the price. So I'm sure we are going to have this mid of next year. I think we are going to offer this, but we don't like to do stuff what where we are not happy with, or where we say, if you, some of the tests we did and the information we got back from the marks and the data, they were useless, and we don't want to sell useless stuff. So if we do something, we are absolutely, and this is definitely our philosophy, everything what we bring on the market is going to work, and works probably, and has a benefit. And it's a benefit probably to sell it, but for us, but it's definitely not a benefit to sell you a wind measurer which doesn't give you the right data. And this is the decision why we said no, we don't want to do it now.
Who do you consider to be your biggest competition in this? Is it right now simply the traditional methodologies of using race officials in inflatable boats running around the course, or are there other companies that are developing robotic race marks? Or, one of the things that we like to use on San Francisco Bay is something called Race Cues. I don't know if you know that app. Um, it does not, it in no way replaces racing marks, but it does create sort of a virtual race course, on your smartphone, and you place the smartphone in a stable location on your boat, and it measures everything from your roll and pitch motions, your heel angle, your boat speed, all of this stuff. And it's doing it with all the boats on the course at the same time. So it seems like somebody could set up like a virtual race course with no marks at all. So kind of given that background, like, where do you see yourselves fitting in, and where is the big competition technically for you guys?
Um, we I think that the biggest the competition is definitely in now the standard uh, marks, inflatable marks, and marks to get anchors. There are worldwide, are there 5 producers of robotic sail marks, as far as we know. 2.5 of them we take serious. Others we don't, honestly don't take really serious, because it's not it's, we are absolutely sure with this technique that what we have, and all that about the tensor technology, that we have the best product on the market. The biggest thing for us is to come out, also to go to of course there are different producers, um and we have to filter and to show what is the difference. It's like, probably at the end, it's like also a question about what product do you like more. I mean, do you like to drive a Cadillac, or do you like to drive a BMW, or whatever? um the biggest thing is to get the trust into those systems, and this is what I speak for all robotic sail marks. We see we see a lot of clubs using those marks already, but it's a lot of rentals. It's a big investment for yacht clubs. So if we talk about a set of Smartmarks, it's the same price like for a standard RIP with a 60 horsepower engine. Um, And no, yeah, I mean, you don't want to invest in something where you're not sure that it really brings the benefit, and you don't want to invest in something where you're not sure is it really working. And this was or this is still what we do since nearly now 2 years since we founded the company and came on the market, is really to show that Smartmark works. And I think we are doing quite good. We could probably be a bit faster, like always, if you found a company. Um, but we realized that that the clubs we are talking to are really, really interested in those systems. And it's not just about the quality and the efficiency. There is also the problem that to set standard race courses or regular marks, you always need people for that, and not just people who say, yeah, we can do it. No, people they're really able to do it, because there is something, a bit of knowledge needed to set a race course, and still you have to be fast. And then you have to spend your entire weekend non-paid on the water. If the sun is shining, it's perfect. If it's raining, not the nicest job. So we realize a lot of requests, or interest, and also request. But we also realized that it's still, it takes quite long time until decisions are made.
Yeah.
Especially also in clubs, for in
Sure.
yacht clubs.
If it, I can see where, again, we have a fellow on the bay. His company calls Regatta Pro, and I could see, this is Jeff Zarwell, and I could see where he's running races himself, and he's doing it for the different clubs. I could see where he could utilize something like this. But the Smartmark, it can navigate at, it looked like about 4 knots, and to set up a race course, using his rib, he's out there, he's running probably 25, 30 knots. So how would, if somebody like that were going to set up a race course with Smart Marks, how would they do that? Would they put that in the rib and then take it to its approximate location to get the course set up quickly, or uh, how typically would that be done? These things are pretty big; they're pretty heavy. They, weigh over 100 pounds. So, and they've been utilized. How is that usually managed?
Actually, it depends a little bit on how far your race course is outside. If it's far from shore, you can tow the mark super easy with up to 50 knots. So, and we don't promise, because it's just not right. Our product will help to reduce the need of boats on the water, but we don't get rid of the boats. You still have jury, you still have race committee boats. So there is always, and of course there are safety boats and around. So if you go very far outside, you can tow the marks super easy. So you just attach a line and then you tow them. And if you are there, you just release them. So there's nothing you have to do with the marks. The only thing is there's a power button. You have to switch the mark on, and that's it. So we don't have to lift any motors or something like that. So it's actually quite easy to also bring it by a boat on in the right direction of the race course. We got a lot of battery power on the boat in the Smartmark. So from the serial, we have 180 ampere hours. That means we can, in standard normal conditions, pure driving will be around 10 to 12 hours, just sailing. And this needs the most power. To keep the position doesn't need that much power. So they will do it 24 to 28 hours in normal positions. And then we have an upgrade to 240 ampere hours, which makes sense if you have a lot of current. For example, San Francisco, I would suggest to have the 240 ampere hours, which is 140% more of battery power than all our competitors. You can easily also get your marks out in the morning, just from the harbor. So this is what I do. Of course, it depends on the area where you are, but you can just bring them out of the harbor. You give on the user interface, you can already type in your race course and give each mark a predetermined position. So and then you push the play button, and each mark will just sail until it reaches this position. And if the position is reached, the mark will go into the loiter mode and just stay there and wait. And the nice thing is that it's not just for big regattas really nice, where when there are big races, you always have a lot of stuff. But there are a lot of club internal races where there's probably just one person in charge to set up a race course. But he can easily do it, or she, just 1, 2, or 3 hours before even the racing, the first warning signal is given. And if they go out with the race committee boat, they just adjust the course when the race committee boat is on anchor. And it's up to you. So you can tow it, it can drive itself. It's a bit about the time, of course. If you send the marks like 5 miles away, they go up to 4.5 knots. So it then an hour of drive for them. And of course, you're faster if you put them on a rip, or you tow them with a rip.
Right. Yeah. That makes sense. And I'm actually rather impressed by both the speed that they travel and the battery life. Both of those seem like fairly impressive numbers, and the amp hours that the batteries hold also is quite a bit. I compare that to um, the batteries that I have on my boat, and it's like, yeah, that's in the same that's in the same ballpark. So it's a lot of power. Let's go to a little bit more the business side of this, and then I think we'll start to wind up. But I'm curious, we've talked a lot about the technical challenges and what the smart marks do technically, but I'm also interested in you as an entrepreneur. And it looked like you had some other companies before. You talked about some of the marketing type work that you did before, and it looked like you might have had a company called Velamente at one time. Maybe that was the marketing company. But as far as Smartmark is concerned, what have you found to be your biggest business challenges? With this, has it been financing or marketing, kind of acceptance of the technology? What have been the big hurdles for you?
To found a company is always about money and capital to have. We decided to go as far as we can by ourselves. We don't have any investors yet in the company, what on one way makes it quite difficult. Or let's say with an investor, a lot of stuff would be much more easy. We could of course go way more out and be way faster to enter the markets. For now, we are just more or less in Europe. I mean, we got interest from all over the world, from Asia, Australia, New Zealand, Canada, and the US. But we don't even have now a dealer network. So we start now to really look for dealers. For me, the biggest challenge was we had some interesting interviews with some investors who really were also keen to become part of the company. But for me personally, I always said I was always against this in the beginning, out of 2 reasons. The first thing was that I don't want to lose the startup spirit for us. And if it's just about money, it's good in the beginning, but it won't make us really happy at the end if we are just getting pushed and everything has to be perfect. Now we are very small, but our clients we have, we are very close to them, very personal. They know they can call us every weekend. They can call us Sunday if they are racing, they have an issue. They know whether me or my colleague or our I mean, we have we have a small team, of course. There is always someone available. And the financial thing is definitely a big thing. But I think what is the most difficult for now is that we are entering a brand new market, and we bring a product on the market where we are not able to look to the left or the right and see how others do it. So we really have to find our own way. How do yacht clubs, race officers, sailors talk about those marks? Do they like it? What is it they want? And what is the pricing? What we can do? Honestly, the pricing for the moment is of course really difficult. Everything raises. It's transport costs. It's the entire technology gets more expensive, and we really try to keep it low. We from I think if we would have an investor, he would tell us get 20% up with your price, at least for now. But we don't want to do this because we know then we come into it would just be too expensive, and there is always it has a lot of benefits, but this benefits also has to be compared to the investment you do. Um, so it's definitely the business model, and the business model. What is difficult is that we knew from the beginning that we want to found the company and we will have 100 clients the first week, and it's difficult to calculate when will you have your first sale and when will you have the break even that and where you really go and you're going to start. It's a bit like probably electric cars. So there has to be one person who said, okay, now I buy a Tesla and I will be the first one. And then the neighbor said, oh, maybe it's a nice car. Maybe I buy one too. So, but it was slowly. And now everyone wants to have it, and then it's going much more faster. And this is, I think this acceleration we still don't have, but we are absolutely sure that this acceleration will come. But the question for us is, when will this acceleration really happen?
Right.
And this is now.
Yeah. Now, one of the things I was curious about, you mentioned that there were 5 companies in the business and 2.5 that you took seriously. And I'm curious, where did you fit in the history of that? Were you the first, or had one or more of these other companies been founded when you started?
When I don't know, and so there is one company from the US called Marketbot. They are on the market, I think, since 2016, end of 2016, beginning of 2017. So they are way longer on the market, but I don't know when they started the development. We we started the development 2000. What is it? 15. So it's difficult to say. Others, we had another company. And then this is I don't know a lot. And so Mark said, but I think it's the biggest competitor. I mean, we can talk about this open because they are most known probably in the market. They were the first to bring robotic sail marks um, on the market, and of course they got a lot of attention in the world of sailing or in the sailing world. So. The other marks, I'm not really. I don't know enough about them. I don't see them a lot of places, so it's difficult to really see um, how they behave. We don't know anything about their success, but we don't know much about their problems too. So it's not like that we talk to each other. Let's say this. So it's
You
uh,
have the corporate spies yeah, to see what's
yeah.
going on.
Maybe it's a bit like maybe it's good for the business that it's like the Microsoft Apple thing. It's just a question who we are and who the others
Yeah,
are.
the competition's very good.
We on one way we like Apple more from the design, but maybe from the technique, Microsoft is better.
I want to acknowledge you for your entrepreneurship, for taking the risk to push the envelope, to bring something exciting to the world, to the market. That this is really interesting stuff, and I can myself picture how this kind of technology can really transform what we do in yacht racing and making it a lot easier and bringing it, you know, I think what we'd all like, bringing it more to the masses. So acknowledge you and thank you for taking the time this morning to chat with us and to produce this podcast. So job well done.
Thank you very much. If there are any questions, feel free to get in touch with us anytime. If somebody is listening and is interested to become a distributor, dealer, investor, we are open to talk.